Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
The words hit me like a slap, but I kept folding laundry. The girls tell me I could do better. She said it casually, like commenting on the weather, while scrolling through her phone on our bed. Not looking at me. Not even acknowledging the weight of what she'd just thrown into our Saturday morning routine. I set down the shirt I was holding, one of mine that she'd borrowed and never returned, and turned to face her. The morning light streaming through our bedroom window caught the highlights in her hair, the same hair I'd been running my fingers through for 3 years. Do they now? My voice was steady, curious even. Inside, something cold and final was crystallizing. She finally looked up from her phone, probably expecting me to argue, to get defensive, to prove my worth like some contestant on a game show she was hosting. Instead, I just nodded slowly, deliberately. Interesting perspective. I mean, she continued, emboldened by what she mistook for acceptance, shifting position on the bed like she was settling in for a comfortable conversation. Sarah's dating this guy who takes her to these amazing restaurants every weekend. Like, really fancy places. And Jess just got engaged to someone who bought her a car for her birthday. A brand new BMW. They keep asking me what you've done for me lately, and honestly, I don't know what to tell them anymore. I resumed folding clothes, each crease deliberate and precise. The stack of her laundry grew neat and orderly under my hands, the same hands that had been caring for her things without acknowledgement for months. And what do you tell them? She shifted again, tucking one leg under her. That's just it. I don't know what to say. Like, you're sweet and all, but when was the last time you surprised me with something? When was the last time you did something that made me feel special? I thought about the surprise dinner I'd planned for next week. The reservation I'd made 3 weeks ago at Chez Laurent. That French place she'd mentioned loving after seeing it on Instagram. The one where I'd specifically requested the corner table by the window because she'd once said she loved watching people walk by. The gift I'd been hiding in my closet for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. A vintage bracelet I'd found at an estate sale that matched the one her grandmother had worn, the one she'd cried about losing last year. I thought about the weekend getaway I'd been researching for her birthday. The bed and breakfast in Napa Valley where they offered private wine tastings and couples massage packages. I'd already put down a deposit. You're right, I said simply, folding a pair of her jeans with the same care I'd always given her belongings. When was the last time? She seemed genuinely surprised by my agreement, blinking twice as if she'd prepared for an argument and suddenly found herself shadowboxing. Exactly. And it's not just about money, you know? It's about effort. About showing that you care enough to go above and beyond. Above and beyond. I thought about last month when she had food poisoning and I spent the entire weekend taking care of her. Bringing her water and crackers every hour, cleaning up when she couldn't make it to the bathroom in time, holding her hair back while she was sick, sleeping on the floor next to the bed so I could wake up if she needed anything. I'd called in sick to work on Monday because she still felt weak. I thought about the time I drove 4 hours to pick her up when her car broke down during her girls' trip to wine country. How I'd left work early, driven through traffic and construction, and arrived to find her friends had already made alternative arrangements but hadn't bothered to tell me. How I'd driven her back anyway, listening to her complain about the trip being ruined, never mentioning that I'd missed an important client dinner. I thought about every morning for 3 years when I'd made her coffee exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, served in her favorite mug, even though I preferred mine black and simple. How I'd bring it to her in bed on weekends, along with the section of the newspaper she liked to read. But those weren't Instagram-worthy gestures. Those weren't stories she could share with the girls, weren't moments that came with receipts and pictures and social media evidence. Sarah says I should give you an ultimatum, she continued, warming to her theme now, her voice taking on the conspiratorial tone she used when sharing gossip. Either step up or step aside. Let someone who really appreciates me have a chance. Sarah. Single Sarah who'd been through 4 relationships in the past 2 years. Sarah who criticized every boyfriend her friends had while remaining perpetually alone. Sarah whose idea of relationship advice came from romantic comedies and dating apps. I folded the last towel and placed it carefully in the basket. Sarah sounds very wise. Are you even listening to me? Her voice carried a note of frustration now, the kind that suggested she'd expected a different reaction entirely. She'd wanted a fight, an argument, desperate promises to change, maybe some begging. Instead, she was getting calm agreement, and it was clearly not part of her script. I'm listening. You think you could do better. Your friends think you could do better. You want someone who goes above and beyond. I picked up the laundry basket, feeling the weight of 3 years of domestic care she'd never noticed. Message received. I carried the basket to the dresser and began putting her clothes away, each item placed exactly where she liked it. She watched me with growing confusion, probably trying to figure out why her bombshell announcement was being met with helpful organization rather than panic. That's it. That's all you have to say. I opened her underwear drawer and placed the folded items inside with the same care I'd always shown. What would you like me to say? That your friends are wrong? That you shouldn't want more than what we have? That you should settle for someone who doesn't meet your standards? She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her processing this unexpected response. I just thought you'd, I don't know, fight for me or something. Fight for her. Like she was a prize to be won rather than a partner I'd been building a life with. Like love was a competition where I needed to constantly prove my worth rather than something we created together through daily choices and mutual respect. I closed the drawer and turned to face her. Why would I fight against what you want? If you think you can do better, you probably can. The rest of the morning passed in strange, uncomfortable quiet. She kept glancing at me as if waiting for delayed shock to set in, for me to suddenly realize what I was losing and start the desperate bargaining she'd probably anticipated. Instead, I made breakfast, scrambled eggs the way she liked them, with chives from the herb garden I'd planted for her, and ate while reading the newspaper. I spent the day thinking, not about how to win her back or prove my worth, but about what she'd really told me. That after 3 years of what I'd thought was partnership, she saw our relationship as something she was settling for. That she'd rather take relationship advice from single friends who seemed to view her happiness as a zero-sum game than work with me to build something meaningful. But mostly, I thought about the word better. Better than someone who remembered how she liked her coffee. Better than someone who took care of her when she was sick. Better than someone who listened to her work drama every night and offered solutions when asked, silent support when not. Better than someone who had been quietly planning to propose next month, who'd been carrying her grandmother's ring in his pocket for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment that would never come now. That evening, she tried to soften the morning's blow. I was making dinner, her favorite pasta dish with the sauce recipe I'd perfected over months of trial and error, when she appeared in the kitchen doorway looking almost contrite. Look, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings earlier. I just think we could both put in more effort, you know? Like, maybe we've gotten too comfortable. I kept stirring the sauce, watching it bubble and thicken. No hurt feelings. You were being honest about how you see things. I don't want you to think I'm ungrateful, but you are. I turned to face her, wooden spoon still in hand, sauce steaming. And that's okay. You're allowed to want more than what we have. She blinked, clearly not expecting this response. In her mind, this was probably the moment where I was supposed to grovel, to promise changes, to beg for another chance. That's not what I said. You said your friends think you could do better. You agreed with them. You're questioning what I've done for you lately, implying that whatever I have done isn't enough. I shrugged, turning back to the stove. Those are fair assessments. You're entitled to your standards. So what are you saying? The pasta was almost ready. I'd been timing it perfectly, the way I always did, so everything would be hot and fresh when we sat down together. Another small gesture she'd never noticed. I'm saying you should probably listen to your advisors. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the pasta water boiling, the sauce simmering, the kitchen clock ticking. All the sounds of a domestic life I'd thought we were building together. Are you breaking up with me? She asked quietly. I drained the pasta, steam rising around me like a cloud. I'm agreeing with you. You think you can do better. I think you should try. She left for her weekly girls' night out around 7, probably to discuss this latest development with her council of relationship experts. She kissed my cheek before leaving, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like habit than affection, and said she'd be back around midnight. I used the time productively. First, I called Chez Laurent and canceled next week's reservation. The hostess was apologetic about the late notice, but understanding when I explained there'd been a change in circumstances. Then I drove to the jewelry store where I'd bought her grandmother's bracelet. The owner remembered me, remembered how excited I'd been about finding the perfect gift. He processed the return with professional sympathy, giving me a full refund since I still had the receipt and the bracelet was in perfect condition. Back home, I researched the return policy for the Napa Valley getaway. Luckily, I could cancel with only a small fee since it was more than 48 hours in advance. I called and explained that my plans had changed. The reservation agent was kind enough to waive the fee entirely when I mentioned it was due to a relationship ending. By the time she came home around midnight, later than usual, probably due to an extended strategy session, her suitcases were packed and waiting by the front door. She stood in the doorway, keys still in her hand, staring at the luggage like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. She was slightly flushed from wine and animated conversation, probably having spent the evening discussing her relationship dilemma with friends who'd undoubtedly encouraged her to see how I'd respond to her ultimatum. What is this? I emerged from the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea, freshly showered, and wearing the comfortable clothes I'd been looking forward to all day. What you wanted? A chance to do better. This is insane. I never said I wanted to leave. You said your friends think you could do better. You said you wanted someone who goes above and beyond. You said you didn't know what to tell them about what I've done for you lately. I sipped my tea, noting how she was still standing in the doorway as if afraid to fully enter. I'm giving you the opportunity to find all of that. She moved toward the suitcases, kneeling to open the larger one. Everything was folded neatly, organized exactly the way she preferred. Her jewelry was in the small travel case I'd bought her for our first anniversary. Her toiletries were packed in the cosmetic bag her sister had given her last Christmas. Even her shoes were wrapped in tissue paper to prevent scuffing. You can't just pack my stuff and throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. I'm supporting your growth. I sat down in my favorite reading chair, the one she'd always complained was too big for the living room. You've identified what you want, someone better than me. The logical next step is to go find that person. She stood up, brushing dust from her knees, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. This wasn't going according to plan. Her announcement was supposed to motivate me to try harder, to compete for her attention, to prove that I could be the man her friends thought she deserved. This is because of what I said earlier, isn't it? I was just venting to you about my frustrations. Couples do that. It's normal. No, you were sharing honest feedback about our relationship. And I listened. I set my teacup on the side table, the one I'd refinished myself last year after she'd admired a similar piece in a magazine. You told me exactly how you feel about what we have together. I respect you enough to take you at your word. She sat down on the edge of the couch, trying to establish eye contact, probably employing some strategy her friends had suggested for managing difficult conversations. Relationships have rough patches. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. Were you frustrated when you said it? I asked, genuinely curious. Because you seemed pretty relaxed, comfortable, like you'd been thinking about it for a while. The flush that crept up her neck told me I was right. This hadn't been a momentary outburst or a temporary doubt. This was a conclusion she'd reached after careful consideration and extensive consultation with her advisory board. Your friends didn't put the idea in your head. I continued, watching her face carefully. They just gave you permission to voice what you were already feeling. She tried a different approach, softening her voice and leaning forward slightly. What if I was wrong? What if I made a mistake? People are allowed to change their minds. Then you'll learn from it. With someone else. That's not fair. I almost laughed, but managed to keep my expression neutral. Fair. You spent the morning telling me I don't measure up to your standards, and now you want to negotiate terms that let you keep me around while you figure out if something better comes along. She was quiet for a long moment, probably cycling through whatever other strategies her friends had suggested. So there's nothing I can say that will change your mind? You could try explaining to your friends why you've decided to stay with someone you think you're settling for. You could try telling them that actually, you've been ungrateful and taking me for granted. I finished my tea and set the cup aside. But we both know that's not happening. The truth was settling over both of us like a heavy blanket. She couldn't take back what she'd said, couldn't pretend it had been meaningless, and I couldn't unknow what I now knew about how she really saw our relationship. She stood up and began pacing, a habit I'd always found endearing but now recognized as a stalling tactic. This is ridiculous. 3 years together, and you're going to end it over one conversation? I'm not ending anything. I'm agreeing with your assessment and supporting your decision to upgrade. I never said I wanted to upgrade. You said you could do better. That's the definition of upgrading. She stopped pacing and looked at me directly, and for a moment I saw something genuine in her expression. Fear, maybe, or regret. What if I don't want to do better? What if I want to stay here and work on us? For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of something other than resolve. For just a second, I considered what it would mean to forgive this, to pretend the morning's conversation had never happened, to go back to building a life with someone who saw that life as settling for less. But then I remembered her casual tone that morning, the way she'd said it without even looking at me, like my inadequacy was such an established fact that it didn't require her full attention. The fact that this conversation was only happening because she was facing consequences, not because she'd experienced some genuine change of heart. The time to work on us was before you decided I wasn't good enough, I said quietly. Before you made our relationship a topic of discussion for people who don't care if it succeeds. People talk about their relationships. That's normal. People in happy relationships don't spend time discussing whether they could do better. She picked up one of the suitcases, testing its weight, probably calculating how many trips it would take to move everything to her car. So this is really it? You're really going to make me leave? I'm not making you do anything. I'm giving you what you asked for, the freedom to find someone who meets your standards. It was then that she found the note, tucked into the handle of the larger suitcase, written on our nice stationery. The set her mother had given us as a housewarming gift when we first moved in together, and folded precisely. What's this? She asked, though she was already unfolding it. Read it and see. Her face cycled through several emotions as she read silently first. Confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been shame or regret. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite identify. What does it say? I asked, though I knew every word by heart. She read it aloud, her voice barely a whisper. To my dear girlfriend, thank you for 3 years of honest feedback about my inadequacies. Your friends are right. You can definitely do better than someone who makes you coffee every morning exactly how you like it, even though I prefer mine black. Listens to your work drama every night and offers solutions when asked, silent support when not. Takes care of you when you're sick, sleeping on the floor next to the bed so I can wake up if you need anything. Splits all expenses equally despite earning twice what you do because you insisted on being independent. Drives 4 hours to pick you up when your car breaks down, even when your friends have already made other arrangements. Plans thoughtful surprises you never notice because they're not Instagram-worthy. Treats you like a partner instead of a prize to be won. Remembers every little thing you mention wanting or needing. Has been carrying your grandmother's ring in his pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment to propose. I'm sure you'll find someone who meets your standards. Someone whose love comes with receipts and Instagram-worthy gestures. Someone who proves their worth daily instead of just showing up consistently. Someone who competes for your attention instead of simply giving it freely. Your friends will be so proud. Go try. P.S. I canceled next week's dinner reservation at Chez Laurent, the French place you loved on Instagram, and returned your birthday gift, your grandmother's bracelet from the estate sale. Wouldn't want you to feel obligated to settle for another inadequate gesture. The paper trembled in her hands as she finished reading. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the sound of our neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down. You had a reservation? For next week? Had being the operative phrase. And a birthday gift? Her voice was smaller now, different from the confident tone she'd used that morning. Returned it this afternoon. Full refund. She stared at the note, rereading sections of it. I didn't know about any of this. Of course you didn't. Because gestures you don't know about don't count toward the scoreboard your friends keep. The ring. She started, then stopped. Your grandmother's ring. The one you cried about losing last year. I found one just like it at an estate sale. Same era, same style. Even the same tiny chip in the cornerstone that you said made hers unique. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd taken so many evening walks together. I've been carrying it everywhere, waiting for the right moment. Apparently, there wasn't going to be one. She was crying now, though trying to hide it. I had no idea you were thinking about proposing? Yeah, well, your friend's timing was impeccable. She set the note down carefully on the coffee table, as if it were made of something fragile. Can I see it? The ring? I turned back to face her. I returned it, remember? Along with everything else I thought you might want, but apparently didn't appreciate enough to notice. "This is all wrong," she said, more to herself than to me. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." "How was it supposed to go?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I thought you'd fight for me. I thought you'd make more effort. I thought you'd prove that you really wanted to be with me." "By begging? By competing with whatever fantasy your friends have sold you about what your life should look like?" I sat back down, but this time on the edge of the chair, ready to stand again. "I spent 3 years proving I wanted to be with you. I proved it every morning with coffee, every night with conversation, every time you needed me and I was there. But apparently, none of that counted because it wasn't dramatic enough for your audience." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "What did you mean to happen?" She was quiet for a long moment, probably trying to reconstruct her original plan. "I guess I wanted you to try harder, to show me that I was worth more effort." "More effort than what?" "Than learning exactly how you like your coffee and making it for you every day for 3 years? Than planning secret romantic dinners and buying thoughtful gifts and carrying an engagement ring around for weeks?" I shook my head. "Or did you mean more effort like expensive restaurants and flashy gifts that your friends could see and approve of?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you wanted me to audition for the role of your boyfriend while you decided whether someone better might come along." She stood up, moving toward the suitcases again, then away from them, like she couldn't decide whether to stay or go. "I just wanted to feel special. I wanted to feel like you were grateful to have me." I was grateful. Past tense. I was grateful every day for 3 years. I was grateful when you smiled at me over morning coffee. I was grateful when you fell asleep next to me at night. I was grateful for every ordinary moment we shared. I paused. But apparently, gratitude isn't enough if it doesn't come with a social media presence. She stood there for another 10 minutes, occasionally picking up the note and rereading sections of it, probably waiting for me to break. To take it back, to fight for her the way she'd expected me to when she'd first dropped her bombshell that morning. But I'd already fought for 3 years, and apparently, that hadn't been enough. Or rather, it hadn't been the right kind of fighting. I'd fought by showing up, by being consistent, by building something steady and real. She'd wanted me to fight by competing, by proving my worth against imaginary rivals, by treating our relationship like a contest I needed to win daily rather than a partnership I needed to nurture consistently. "I'll stay at Sarah's tonight," she finally said, her voice small and uncertain. "Good choice. I'm sure she'll have lots of advice about your next steps." She grabbed both suitcases, struggling slightly with their weight. I almost offered to help, then remembered that helping her leave was exactly what I was doing, just not in the way either of us had expected. At the door, she turned back one more time. "You'll regret this." "I'll regret settling for someone who thinks settling for me is beneath her standards." The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was alone in the house we'd shared for 2 years. The house where I'd imagined proposing to her next month, probably in the garden where I'd planted herbs for her, or maybe in the kitchen where I'd made her coffee every morning, or perhaps in the living room where we'd spent countless evenings together. I made another cup of tea and sat down to finish the book I'd been reading, a mystery novel she'd said looked boring when I'd started it last week. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. Not the tense silence of unspoken resentment, but the peaceful quiet of a space that finally felt like home again. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text. "Can we please talk about this like adults?" I responded immediately. "We did. This morning. You told me your friends think you can do better." I listened. "That's not what I meant. It's what you said, and I respect your honesty enough to take you at your word." The phone stayed quiet after that, though I could see the little dots that indicated she was typing and deleting messages for almost an hour. Eventually, even those stopped. I went to bed in our room, my room now, and slept better than I had in months. The next few weeks passed in a blur of rediscovered routines. I woke up when I wanted to, made coffee how I liked it, read the entire newspaper instead of just the sections she didn't want. I had dinner with friends she'd never particularly liked, went to movies she'd found boring, listened to music she'd said was too loud. I also started dating. Not seriously, not with any grand plan, just coffee dates and casual dinners with women who seemed happy to spend time with someone who listened when they talked and remembered details from previous conversations. It was amazing how many women appreciated basic courtesy and genuine interest. How many of them saw consistency as a virtue rather than a character flaw? 3 weeks after she'd left, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, probably remembering her role in encouraging my girlfriend to upgrade her relationship status. "Hey," she said awkwardly, clearly hoping for a brief, polite exchange. "How are you doing?" "Great," I replied honestly, loading groceries into my cart. "Really great. How's the relationship counseling business? Still encouraging people to leave their partners?" Her face flushed. "That's not what we were doing." "No? What would you call it when you tell someone they could do better than their current relationship?" She shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if looking for an escape route. "We were just being supportive. That's what friends do. Friends support you. What you did was undermine a 3-year relationship because it wasn't exciting enough for your standards." I continued loading groceries, keeping my voice conversational. "Tell me, how many successful long-term relationships do you and your advisory committee have between you?" She didn't have an answer for that. "Tell me," I continued, heading toward the checkout line. "How's she doing with the whole doing better project? Found anyone who meets the standards yet?" The silence told me everything I needed to know. "Give her my best," I said, getting in line behind an elderly couple buying ingredients for what looked like a romantic dinner. "And let her know I'm taking my own advice these days. Turns out I really could do better too." As I drove home, I thought about the woman I'd started seeing more regularly. Jessica, a teacher who'd laughed when I'd brought her coffee during our second date, not because it was unusual, but because she was delighted that someone had remembered how she liked it. Someone who talked about books and travel and future plans with an enthusiasm that was infectious. Someone who appreciated consistency instead of demanding constant proof of my worth. Someone who definitely thought she was doing better too. 6 months later, she called. I was in my kitchen, the kitchen I'd completely reorganized after she'd left, removing all traces of the accommodations I'd made for her preferences, making dinner for Jessica and myself when my phone rang. The number was still in my contacts, though I'd removed the heart emoji months ago. "I made a mistake," she said without preamble, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation multiple times. "I realize that now." "Good for you. Self-awareness is important. I want to try again. I know I can be better this time." I was quiet for a moment, watching Jessica laugh at something on her laptop at the kitchen table. She was grading papers, but she'd looked up and smiled when she'd heard my phone ring, then gone back to work when she realized it wasn't urgent. No drama, no questions about who was calling, just trust and respect for my privacy. "I'm sure you can be better," I said finally. "You should definitely try that. With someone else. Please don't do this. I know I hurt you, but you didn't hurt me. You freed me. Best gift you ever gave me, actually." The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. "Tell the girls I said thanks for the advice," I added, stirring the sauce I was making from scratch, something I'd never had time to do when I was spending every evening listening to complaints about her day. They were absolutely right. I really could do better. I hung up and went back to cooking, grateful every day that I'd listened to her friend's wisdom, just not the way any of them had expected. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked, looking up from her papers. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. "Dinner's almost ready." She smiled and saved her work, then came over to help set the table. As she moved around my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who felt welcome and appreciated, I thought about the difference between fighting for someone and fighting with someone. How I'd spent 3 years fighting for a relationship with someone who'd been fighting against it. And now I'd found someone who fought alongside me to build something better together. Later that evening, as we sat on the couch reading, she with her book club selection, me with a biography she'd recommended, I thought about calling the jewelry store to ask if they still had that vintage bracelet. Not for the same reason as before, but because I'd found someone who would appreciate not just the gesture, but the thought behind it. Someone who understood that the best gifts aren't the ones that impress other people, but the ones that show how well you know and care for each other. Someone who definitely thought she could do better than her last relationship too. And the beautiful thing was, we were both right.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.